To freak or not to freak? Preventing sexual harassment and ensuring appropriate conduct in the studio. Let's deal with it. Welcome to the Music Pro, where we offer practical recording objectives to help you create your best situation to produce your best work. I'm Shay Alexander Wright. Today we're going to talk about the elephant in the room when it comes to the music business of late. Music and entertainment industry in particular has faced scrutiny for instances of misconduct, partly due to its often informal and high-pressure environments where power imbalances might be pronounced. Initiatives like the Me Too movement have helped shine a light on this issue, encouraging more accountability and safety measures in music business spaces. Now, if you're currently in a situation related to this or need resources, organizations like the Recording Academy's Behind the Record initiative and general workplace harassment hotlines may offer guidance. I'm leaving links to this information and other resources below. After a meeting I had the other day around an event coming up this spring in support of sexual harassment awareness, I thought it might be a good idea to run a segment on the topic and how to keep our studios and businesses free from incidents of a bad nature, given the recent public information of freak-offs and other outlandish behavior and practices of several music and entertainment figures. Statistics specific to the U.S. are basically non-existent, which I find outrageous and a testament to lax and piggish attitudes regarding sexual harassment in the music business here. Across the pond, though, the UK seems to be on top of this issue and maybe even getting ahead of it, seeing a slight decline since incidents are becoming more reported there. In the UK, 48% of mainly female musicians reported being sexually harassed, with 85% of victims not reporting abuse at all. On a global front, Tunecore has developed a comprehensive report based on an ongoing study of individuals in the music industry. And this study reveals that 3 in 5 women say they've been sexually harassed, with 1 in 5 having been sexually assaulted in the music business. 70% have chosen not to report their experiences for fear of retaliation, and over 50% who did report say their claims were completely ignored. A third of women who reported say they were encouraged to stay quiet, while 12% of the women who did report ended up getting fired after their claims. The Tunecore report also points out that the normalization of objectification is one of the biggest contributors to the loose behavior and attitudes of men in music. And this makes perfect sense to me, because if you think about it, the first things we typically observe and survey in any artist is the quality of their beauty and physique. The music creative process quite naturally stands as one of the most intimate situations people can find themselves. And I'd even argue it's quite possibly even more intimate than doing romantic scenes for actors on stage, television, or film. Now, having acted before, I say this based on how I've heard many actors describe their experiences as being awkward and self-conscious relative to their professional partners' boundaries and comfort levels, which also involves a good deal of external oversight and choreography. And their descriptions also usually entail a good number of people being in the space, watching to ensure that a particular level of performance is executed. Now, I also make this comparison because a musically creative setting usually doesn't involve anyone outside the individuals doing the creating, which typically brings about an intimate dynamic not unlike a situation people romantically and personally involved can find themselves. And what you ultimately have is an atmosphere for people to share thoughts and ideas at their most vulnerable. It establishes a setting where real trust is built, and you're mentally and psychologically investing in a union where the sole objective is to conceive a product that's audibly and emotionally tangible and will live on forever. So it's a no-brainer that when people are working this close together, it can be seducing, and the energy exchange can lead to all sorts of outcomes and happenings. And where it starts to shift to dangerous ground, it's when there's an attraction in either one direction or both. If an understanding and boundaries aren't established up front, things can get muddy fast, and it'll mess with your business. Now, however consensual, there have been times in my own career where I and artists I've worked with found ourselves blurring the lines between our business and personal lives. And when I've looked back, I thought about how dangerous those situations could have been if we hadn't been on the same page in terms of our affairs. I've also thought of some situations where I hoped I wasn't misunderstood, or an artist felt like I was putting them in a compromising position due to something I said or maybe a way I physically touched them. We can misread a lot of things when we're caught up in a moment creatively. Over recent years, I've listened to the artists I've worked with who have been sexually harassed and assaulted, and I'm honored they've trusted me to provide a safe environment and trust me to work with them when they're at their most vulnerable in the creative process. And for this segment, I've put together a few practical tips to ensure your studio remains a safe and productive environment. Number 1, establish clear boundaries. Right from the beginning, discuss professional expectations and boundaries openly. And don't go into a creative partnership with ulterior motive, like using your talents as leverage to press up on somebody. That's whack. Ensure everybody in the room understands that your studio is a workplace and safe space, not a hookup joint. Respect each other's physical and emotional boundaries, and never make assumptions about another person's comfort level. Number 2, keep your communication professional. Now, it's inevitable for conversations to go all over the place about all sorts of stuff. That's the nature of establishing rapport and building trust. But keep the focus on the music and the task at hand as much as you can, using those conversations to fuel the synergy between you. Now, this one here might be hard because the spicy banter is part of keeping a relaxed environment, but avoid flirtatious, suggestive, or overly personal comments that could make somebody feel uncomfortable. Be mindful of your tone and language. Jokes or casual remarks can sometimes be misinterpreted, misconstrued, and misunderstood. Number 3, make a studio code of conduct. Put together a set of guidelines outlining acceptable behavior along with consequences for misconduct. And post it in a visible area of your studio or share it with collaborators ahead of time as part of your terms for doing business. And make sure people understand that harassment of any kind just won't be tolerated. I've placed a free conduct code PDF below that you can download if you want. 4, identify and navigate power dynamics. Recognize the inherent power imbalance when working with artists, producers, or collaborators at different levels of experience and status. Avoid using your position of influence to make anybody feel obligated to tolerate inappropriate behavior. Insist on mutual respect and equality in all of your professional relationships. And when it comes to underage artists, it's your responsibility as an adult to protect those younger than your own experience and age. Whenever possible, insist that their parent or guardian accompany them to the sessions. Young minds are extremely impressionable, and they don't possess the maturity to compartmentalize politeness, genuine care, and rapport from intimacy. Number 5, stay aware of people's vulnerabilities. Recognize that the creative process can be deeply personal and emotionally charged. Be careful mixing personal and professional relationships. If feelings do develop, address them honestly. And I recommend dealing with it outside of the studio so not to invite awkwardness and conflict in your workspace. Avoid instigating conversations or situations that can make others feel uncomfortable or unsafe in their vulnerability. Number 6, speak up and step in. If you see someone acting up in a session, address it professionally and constructively, and figure out how to tell the aggressor to back off. You want to establish a culture where everybody in the collaboration feels safe and free from tension that could negatively impact the workflow. Make yourself available and open to anyone who feels like they're being taken advantage of, and take them at their word. Number 7, keep your eyes on the prize. Your studio is a space for collaboration and creation, not personal pursuits. Keep the music and the mutual goal of producing exceptional work your number 1 priority. I'm not saying don't have fun. Creating new music with people you like working with should always be fun, more fun than you ever imagined. But keep the interactions as professional as necessary, especially when the hours are getting long or everyone feels under pressure. Look, every recording studio should be a haven for creativity, trust, and collaboration, like a sanctuary or a temple. And by establishing boundaries, respecting others, and providing a safe environment, you're protecting not only yourself and anyone involved, but also the integrity of your work. Remember, professionalism doesn't stifle creativity, it encourages it. I know to a certain extent, grown folks are going to do what grown folks are going to do. And I know better than anybody as an artist that artists can be a special kind of bunch. And sometimes, depending on the situation, shit can get kind of wild in the studio. And I also know better than anybody, a lot of times that energy is what gets ingrained into the music as it's being created and recorded, which is a big factor in people getting turned on to it. Now, on the darker side of this potential, here's another thought. If you tend to have the kind of vibe in your studio that makes things a little loose, I suggest you get with a lawyer and prepare some kind of consent form. If you're one of those types who just keeps an environment where things are always escalating to freak-off status, you should make everyone accountable for their own actions crossing the lines of professionalism, starting with yourself. And the slippery slope here is this. In order for a consent agreement like this to really be effective, everybody involved has got to have something to lose equally. It's the only way to look out for your own best interests as well as others. Look, we all know the producer types who use the fact that they do music to manipulate people into their space. And we all know those artists who use their sex appeal to get people to work with them. Try to recognize these types from jump. They're troublemakers, period, plain and simple. And they'll try their best to destroy everything you've worked hard for if they don't get their way. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out individuals, artists, executives, and groupies alike who falsely accuse others of harassment and assault because they weren't able to have their way for whatever reason. I'm equally disgusted by these individuals because they trivialize the plights of people legitimately abused, and it makes it harder for people who are sexually abused to be believed and supported generally and immediately. So be on your best behavior. And again, I'm not saying certain things don't happen sometimes. Hell, all the time in some people's cases. I've been on the receiving end of compromising situations myself a few times. I knew what was happening when it was happening, and I always refused and handled myself in a way that let the aggressor know I wasn't having it, all while not disrupting the flow. Fact. Our industry is loaded with creeps, and the reason it's loaded with creeps is because there's no real criteria to be involved in the music business in the first place. When I was coming up, my dad used to say to my brother and me that he wouldn't spend 15 minutes in our industry for this very reason. Remember, let your music be your legacy, not the memory of your misconduct. And like always, this is open for discussion in the comments. All I'm asking is that we be constructive in our statements and opinions, and let's help each other be on the right side of this thing. If you are a victim of sexual harassment and or assault in the music industry, click the links to supporting resources below. I stand with survivors. Thanks for stopping in. Until next time, I'm Shay Alexander Wright.